3 days ago, I blew up the turbo in my M240i with the B58 engine. Well, you might be thinking, how on earth do you blow up the turbo on the B58? Well, I'll show you exactly how in today's video. Now, you're probably just as shocked as me watching this video. How on earth do you blow up the turbo on one of these engines? Well, today I'm going to be showing you guys why I think the turbo actually destroyed itself on this car. Number two, what I'm going to be doing to replace it. Am I going to go big turbo, all that kind of stuff? And number three, what you guys can do to make sure this never happens on your B58 engine. Now, before we go any further, let's work out exactly how I knew this car had some sort of turbo failure, because it's not going to be what you guys think it is. The way I found out that this turbo had actually completely destroyed itself is not what you think. I came across it in a very strange way. Now, the other day, if you're subscribed to the channel, you'll know I fitted a 5-inch downpipe to this car. And while I was underneath the car, I decided to check the hot side turbo to see if there was any play in the fins, to see if the fins were damaged, all that kind of stuff. And to my surprise, there was no play in the turbo, there was no play in the bearings, the fins, everything was pretty much in perfect condition, which I thought was pretty good. Until about 3 days ago, when I actually went to fit a metal charge pipe to the front of this B58. And obviously, the charge pipe carries the compressed air from the turbo, so you're working in this area. I got the air intake off, I got the original charge pipe off, and I was all ready to install this new metal one. And my day was going really well. I was about to fit this new charge pipe, the car was running well, thought there would be no issues. While the engine was so stripped down, fitting this charge pipe, I decided to actually check the cold side of the turbo to see what the fins on that were like. So, as I did, put my hand in a little bit to feel the bearings, feel the vanes, and I honestly almost cut my hand to pieces. And this is where I knew things were not very good. So, the positive to this situation was there was no play in the turbine. However, the vanes or the fins on a turbine, whatever you want to call them, they almost cut my hand. They were that sharp, and they weren't sharp in a good way. Let me put a picture on screen of what my turbo on this B58 looked like, because it had completely destroyed itself. If you know anything about turbocharged cars, you'll know that the turbine on the cold side of the turbo is never meant to look like that, ever. So straight away, I knew something was wrong. A turbocharger is never meant to look like that. And I posted this on my TikTok, on my Instagram, etc. And a lot of you guys thought that I'd been running the car with no air filter and all that kind of stuff. I'm gonna get to what exactly happened very shortly, so stay tuned. And I'm gonna show you the old turbo and how destroyed it was in just a second. You might be wondering how I can actually start the car and drive it if my turbo is completely destroyed. Well, if you know me, you know I don't like to hang about, especially when fixing things on a car. So once I knew this turbo was absolutely destroyed, I decided to get looking for a new one. But before I show you guys exactly what turbo I went for to make sure this car is up and running again, we've got to show you the old turbocharger and go through the possible causes of what I think caused the turbo to fail. And for anyone wondering, the car still runs like an absolute dream. Absolutely perfectly. So I think it's time. Let's show you guys the turbo. I want to show you guys how badly the cold side of the turbo is destroyed, how badly the vanes are mangled and everything. And then we've got to try and work out how the B58 didn't suffer some significant engine damage with how badly this turbo is destroyed. And here we have it in all its glory, the blown up stock B58 turbo. So I decided to take the entire thing off, manifold, you name it. It all came off. The issue isn't with the hot side, it's with this cold side here. Now, looking at the hot side of the turbo, we can see that the fins, which is what takes arguably the most abuse when it comes to the actual turbo itself, they're completely fine. And you'll notice all the vanes are intact. They are working perfectly and there were no issues there. However, the issue is when we flip the turbo on the other side. Here we have it in all its glory. 3, 2, 1. Look at that. This thing is absolutely toast. I have never seen turbines that destroyed on a cold side of the turbo before in my life. Now, usually you see that quite often on the hot side, where you might have a pop and bang map, or you're running aggressive tunes, all that kind of stuff. But on the cold side, this is quite rare. I think it's safe to say this turbo is for the scrap. Now, here's the really strange thing about it. As you can see, the turbo spins really freely. I'm spinning this on the hot side here, which is obviously now turning the cold side. And if I spin it, you'll notice the turbine spins completely free and there's no play in the bearings, it's not catching. It does function pretty well. And it is quite heavy, but we've got to get one picture with a broken turbo and manifold. This thing might keep it as an ornament or some sort of kind of present for myself for blowing up a B58 turbo. So it's pretty bad, isn't it? And to the life of me, I can't really work out how that particularly happened. But I'm going to go over one cause, and that is the air intake. So let me show you guys the air intake on this car, and then I'm going to discuss with you guys why I think this particular air intake has caused this to happen. Again, there's no facts here. This is all just me thinking, because I truthfully don't actually know what caused this turbo to fail. So let's take a look at the air intake. Now right here is a £1,300 or $1,500 Venturi air intake. And as you can see, this thing is a carbon fibre work of art. It looks absolutely incredible in the engine bay. However, I think this has a dark side to it. Let's just quickly recap how this air intake works. So for example, if we come to the front of the car, you can't really see it too well, but we've got a carbon fibre air intake scoop. So when you're driving quite fast, all of that air is being pushed directly into this area of the engine. And the scoop kind of follows underneath here and then obviously goes to this cone, which even Venturi are famous for the way the air intakes sound. It's all been cleverly designed. But to show you guys the next part on why I think this is why the turbo has failed, we've got to take the air intake off and I've got to show you the inside of it. So I'm going to take that off now and then we'll have a look. And this is just one possible reason of why this turbo could have failed. There are loads of other things, which we will go into more detail in that later on in the video. So here it is in my hands, a whole £1,300 of carbon fibre and performance engineering. However, the catch, you can't really see it. It's more on the inside here. Let me show you guys what I mean. This air intake may look all lovely and wonderful, and trust me, it is, and it offers some superb performance gains. However, a lot of people on the TikTok and Instagram were commenting saying the filter lets through too many particles. We'll go through that in just a second. What I think the issue is, if you look at this gloss carbon fibre, it's all lacquered and it's all smooth and lovely. If you come to where the actual air flows through the inside of this, it's very hard to see because the carbon fibre is all dark. Let me turn the torch on. Now you can see the actual carbon fibre weave a lot better inside the actual air intake. I'm not going to put my hand in there because if I do, I'll almost cut my hands to pieces. However, I think the issue is pieces of the carbon fibre weave coming off due to the insane suction of the turbo and flying into the turbine. Now, this is a thought I came up with on my own. However, I've also had two people reach out to me to say that they fitted this exact same air intake on their M140i and they've had to replace the turbo twice because pieces of the carbon fibre on the inside were flaking off during, obviously, the car having a hard time driving and flying into the turbine. And that's one thing to mention. The actual inside of this is quite unpleasant on your hand. It's very sharp. There's pieces of carbon fibres and all that kind of stuff poking out everywhere. And one thing to mention is the inside of this isn't lacquered. So unlike the outside where it's all smooth and lovely, the inside is quite rough and quite horrible to touch. Now, the other thing we've got to address is the air filter itself, because this is another thing that people have said that could have happened, is that this air filter, because it's a performance one, is obviously designed to let a lot more airflow through it. And one thing that came to mind is the fact that this air filter might let tiny particles of sand and dust through, which I think is very unlikely. But if that was the cause, any parts like that do slip through the filter are going to be traveling through here at an incredible amount of speed and then theoretically sandblasting the turbine itself. Now, whether these two options are actually the reason the B58 turbo on the cold side destroyed itself, I don't know. And obviously it would be a little bit disappointing if you'd paid that much for an air intake and it was destroying your turbos. However, I just can't see how a brand developing an air intake so expensive would make an issue like that. But I'm not going to completely throw away that option, and it is one thing to consider. Whilst this air intake is absolutely lovely and it does make the intake noises on this B58 sound incredible, I think it is time to let it go. I've shown you guys the turbo. I've also gone over a few possible causes which I think are the most obvious for the B58 turbo failing. Now, there's loads of other things like condensation, which then freezes and then ice going into it. There's loads of other options that could have made this happen. However, I've gone over the two most possible causes. We've gone over those two things. What is the next plan for this car so that we don't have to change the turbo again? And then I'm going to be telling you guys exactly what turbo is currently on the car and you guys can see what I've bought. BMW themselves spend hundreds of thousands of pounds developing their engines. And one thing they spend loads of money on is the air intake system. Whilst this Venturi air intake is amazing, it is going to be coming off the car for a little while. And the main reason for that is I don't know if this is the culprit for making the turbo fail, but I don't want to risk having to replace the turbo again. So what are we going to be doing? I'm currently in the process of buying a stock box B58 air intake. I want to run the stock system for a little bit and I want to put a performance panel filter in that stock box. Obviously, that's all made out of plastic. There's no carbon fibre. It's very cheap and very easy, but it works. Key point here, BMW have designed that box and it works for loads of B58s out there in the world. Like I mentioned, BMW has spent a lot of money designing that air intake, so it's got to have some sort of benefit behind it, and that's what's going to be going on the car next. Eventually down the line, we may look at different aftermarket air intakes again. However, at the moment, after everything I've done replacing this turbo, I don't really want to have to go and do it again, so that is why the stock box system is going to be replacing this Venturi air intake. The next thing to talk about is the fact that I think this turbo has been completely destroyed ever since I've owned this car. If you've been following the channel for a long time, you'll know that I had an M235i before with the N55 engine. We bought this car and it came with this Venturi air intake. Obviously, the car was mapped from when we bought it. I've then mapped it with MHD, just giving you guys a little bit of backstory here. But I've never driven a B58 before, and I've never driven a tuned one, so I had no idea if the performance from this broken turbo was normal, so I didn't pay much attention to it. Whether this turbo has been like this for 3 weeks, or it's been like this for a long, long time, nobody knows. But there is one thing that is slightly confusing to me. The way this car builds boost is very strange. For example, if you do a pull from say 2,500 RPM to 6,500, the boost on these cars usually comes in quite early, maybe from like 3K, maybe 3.5 to 4.5, 5K for example. The boost on this car didn't appear until after 4K RPM. And I say it didn't appear, it would feel like a naturally aspirated car up until about 4,000 RPM. And then once you get past 4,000 RPM, obviously your foot is still planted to the floor. The car just all of a sudden just let on loads of boost. It almost felt like I had a snail, a turbo, this big on the car. The lag was ridiculous. And this is one of the reasons I think that the turbo has been destroyed for a long time, because the car has been like that ever since I've owned it. Since fitting the new turbo, this thing builds boost way earlier in the rev range. Now that we've discussed all the things like the possible causes, showing you the turbo, showing you the past history of this car, I think it's time to actually go over what turbo I fitted on the car. I need to break it to you guys, I feel like a lot of you are going to be quite disappointed with what I fitted. Any of you keen viewers might have noticed that the turbo is still a stock one. I am running the original B58 turbo with no upgrades. Let's dive in. Let me explain exactly why I opted for an OEM turbo and not a pure 800, not a hypercore or anything like that. Why did I buy the original B58 turbo and fit that back on the car? I think one of the most obvious reasons is if you look outside is the UK weather. The ground is always wet, and when it's wet, it's very slippery. And even though I'm running 255 Michelin PS5s on the back, this car still struggles to put all that power down, even with those tyres. And yes, while it would be lovely to chase 550, 600 horsepower in this car, it's just a little bit unrealistic with the UK road conditions. And there is also one other elephant in the room, and that is an LSD. Now the next elephant in the room is the LSD. If you know about M-Lights compared to M-Cars, they come with an open diff, and pushing anything more than stock power with an open diff is a horrible experience, especially if you're trying to get the car sideways, or most importantly, if you're doing some fast road or track driving. The open diffs are very unpredictable and they're not nice to drive. Everybody recommends an LSD, whether that be an M Performance one, whether it be a Quaife. The difference is fitting an LSD to these cars transforms the driving experience on another level. And going back to some previous videos I've made backing them up, talking about actually making sure the car is suited for the power that you're pushing instead of chasing crazy horsepower and not doing anything about suspension, I thought it would be right to temporarily put a stock turbo back on the car, keep the numbers around the 450 horsepower mark on a stage 2 tune, and then make sure I get an LSD fitted, which is on the cards. An LSD will be on this car, and I wanted to make sure that I fitted one before actually chasing any more power, because 450 horsepower with the UK road conditions with an open diff isn't a very nice driving experience. And I know an LSD is going to change that, so that is on the cards for the future. And we've basically covered everything. I've blown at the B58 turbo, I've replaced it, and we've also thought about what we're going to be doing in the future to make this car even better. If it weren't for me 3 days ago fitting this metal charge pipe and actually seeing the cold side of the turbo, I would have been none the wiser. I wouldn't have had to change the turbo, and I wouldn't have known that this car wasn't up to the performance that it should have been. What's done is done. The charge pipe is fitted. That's added some more performance, so I will be making a video on that soon. But let me know in the comment section, do you think this air intake is the cause? Do you think the air filter is the cause? Or do you think that this is a previous owner issue and I just bought a dodgy car? So there we have it. I think I'm one of the first people to actually blow up the cold side of one of these B58 turbos. You definitely see a lot of people blowing up the hot side with pop and bang tunes, anti-lag, all that kind of stuff that damages the hot side vanes. However, you don't see it a lot, especially on the B58s, of the cold side fins being damaged. So I'm definitely taking the fact that this happened to me as a learning lesson. I've learned a lot. I've installed a new turbo on the B58. It's a first for me. I've done it for many different cars, but I've never had the opportunity to do it on this car. so I've learned quite a lot. And now the car is running like a dream. It's running absolutely faultlessly for now. And there we have it. That's basically going to be a wrap for today's video. If you guys enjoyed it, then you could like, subscribe, comment, you can do all that kind of stuff. A new turbo is installed on the B58. It might not be the first. Who knows what will happen in the future? We might go crazy big turbo on this. I've done a stock one, so I can't imagine an upgraded one is going to be much harder. Apart from that, thank you for watching today's video. I hope you learned something like me, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.